The universe does not whisper its secrets. It buries them beneath eons of silence and the crushing weight of the void. In the year 1992, atop the frozen volcanic peaks of Mauna Kea, the air is thin enough to starve the brain of its certainties. Here, a lone astronomer stares at a glowing cathode ray tube, watching a sequence of light that has travelled for billions of years only to end its journey on a silicon chip. But among the familiar patterns of the ancient cosmos, there is a ghost. A single, shivering pixel moves against the backdrop of the primordial stars. It is an intruder, a nameless wanderer that has spent an eternity in the absolute darkness beyond the edge of our perception. This is the moment the map of our reality begins to unravel. We have always imagined our solar system as a fortress, a clockwork masterpiece of order and light, protected by the sun. We were wrong. We are merely an island in an ocean of oblivion, and something has just emerged from the mist. To understand the nature of this intruder, we must first confront the scale of our own insignificance. Imagine the solar system not as a collection of planets, but as a vast, empty cathedral. In the centre, a single candle flickers. This is our sun. The planets are mere dust motes caught in its golden glow, orbiting within the warmth of the nave. But far beyond the reach of the candlelight, where the shadows become absolute, the cathedral does not end. It stretches for miles into a cold, indifferent abyss. This is the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud beyond it, a graveyard of ice and rock left over from the birth of the cosmos. For 4,500,000,000 years, these remnants have drifted in a silent, frozen vigil. They are the sentinels of the void, the discarded scraps of a creation that forgot them long ago. The intruder we have found is one of these lost souls, a dark titan of ice that has been nudged from its slumber by the inexorable pull of distant invisible hands. The mechanism of this intrusion is a delicate symphony of gravity, the invisible loom that weaves the tapestry of the heavens. Gravity is not a choice, it is the ruthless command of mass upon the vacuum. Every star in our galaxy, every black hole lurking in the galactic centre, and every passing stellar neighbour exerts a pull that we can barely measure but cannot escape. When a wandering star passes near the outer reaches of our sanctuary, it acts like a giant invisible finger plucking a string. The vibration ripples through the icy clouds of the periphery, unseating a trillion-ton mountain of frozen methane and water. This object, which has known only the stillness of the absolute zero for 5 billion years, begins its slow, agonizing fall toward the light. It is no longer a resident of the outer darkness. It has become a messenger of catastrophe, a silent predator stalking the inner sanctum of the sun. As it crosses the threshold of the outer planets, the intruder remains invisible to the naked eye. It is a world of charcoal and frost, reflecting less than 4% of the light that strikes it. In the vastness of the abyss, it is nothing more than a shadow within a shadow. Yet its presence is felt long before it is seen. The orbits of the outer giants, Neptune and Uranus, shiver ever so slightly. It is a cosmic game of billiards, played on a scale that defies human comprehension. The intruder does not care for our definitions of life or time. To this frozen remnant, the entire history of human civilization is but a flicker, a momentary spark in a long, dark night. It has seen the birth of the moon and the death of the dinosaurs, and now it watches as a new species of hairless apes begins to point glass lenses toward the heavens, finally noticing the sword hanging above their heads. Consider the paradox of this discovery. We spend our lives focused on the minute details of our terrestrial existence, the petty squabbles of empires and the fleeting passage of seasons. We believe our world is the centre of a grand narrative, but the intruder reminds us that we are an accident of chemistry in a universe that is mostly void. The distance between our world and this silent traveller is measured in billions of miles, a gap so vast that light itself takes hours to bridge it. If you were to stand upon the surface of this intruder, the sun would be nothing more than a particularly bright star, a cold diamond in a sky of ink. There would be no wind, no sound, only the eternal creaking of ice under the pressure of its own gravity. It is a place where time has no meaning, where the only law is the second law of thermodynamics, the slow and inevitable decay of all things into entropy. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmos at work. The intruder is not an anomaly. It is a manifestation of the universe's true nature. We live in a brief window of warmth and stability, a golden age of the sun that will eventually ignite and then fade into a white dwarf, leaving our world to be devoured or cast out into the eternal night. The intruder is a premonition, a fragment of the dark future that awaits every star and every planet. It is a remnant of the primordial chaos, a reminder that the order we see in the night sky is a fragile illusion. The vacuum is not empty. It is filled with the ghosts of failed worlds and the seeds of future catastrophes, all moving in a silent dance governed by laws that do not recognize the concept of mercy. Yet, there is a strange, melancholic beauty in our ability to perceive this threat. We are a collection of atoms that have gained the capacity to contemplate the very abyss from which we emerged. From our tiny, fragile vantage point, we have reached out across the billions of miles to name the nameless and to track the invisible. The astronomer on Mauna Kea is a witness to the majesty of the inexorable. Though we are small, though we are transient, our consciousness is the only thing in the entire universe that gives the intruder a name. Without us, it would fall through the darkness unobserved, a meaningless lump of ice in a meaningless void. With us, it becomes a part of a story, a chapter in the epic of the cosmos. As the intruder draws closer, the sun's warmth begins to touch its surface for the first time in an epoch. The ice begins to sublimating, turning directly from solid to gas, creating a shimmering shroud of vapor that stretches for millions of miles behind it. This is the birth of a comet, a celestial apparition that has terrified and inspired our ancestors for 10,000 generations. To them, it was a portent of the death of kings or the end of the world. To us, it is a scientific curiosity, a laboratory of the early solar system. But both views are correct. It is a herald of change, a reminder that the heavens are not eternal. The shroud of the comet is a funeral shroud for the world it used to be, and perhaps a warning for the worlds it might one day encounter. We stand at the edge of the lens, peering into the dark, watching the intruder glide through the silence. We are the sentinels of a lonely outpost, recording the movements of a universe that does not know we exist. There is no comfort in the stars, only the cold, hard truth of our isolation. But in that isolation, there is a profound sense of wonder. We have seen the silent intruder. We have mapped its path through the abyss. And for a brief moment, we have made the void speak. The history of the universe is a history of light struggling against the darkness, of order emerging from chaos, and of the witness who stands at the center of it all, refusing to look away from the beautiful, terrible infinity. In the waning months of 2024, on the jagged volcanic slopes of Hawaii, the air is thin and carries the chill of the high atmosphere. Here, far above the veil of tropical clouds, the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system stands as a cold sentinel of the void. It is not a monument to human curiosity, nor is it a temple of wonder. It is a functional component of a vast planetary defense mechanism, a series of automated eyes designed to scan the abyss for anything that might threaten the fragile stability of our world. The telescopes do not sleep, nor do they dream. They are indifferent processors of light, translating the ancient photons of the cosmos into binary streams, searching for the one thing the universe excels at producing, a catastrophe in motion. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmic order. Every night, the mechanical housings of these instruments rotate with a precision that mimics the very celestial spheres they observe. There is no awe in the silicon sensors of the camera, only the inexorable logic of detection. And on one particular night, amidst the trillions of bytes of data streaming from the darkness, the machine identified a faint moving smear of light. This was not a malfunction, nor was it a phantom of the optics. It was the first recorded whisper of an intruder named 3I Atlas, a relic from the frozen outskirts of our solar system, now caught in the gravitational gears of the inner sun. To the human mind, we might wish to see this object as a messenger or a rare celestial guest, but the universe recognizes no such poetry. To the machine on the mountain, the comet is merely an anomaly in the data, a kinetic energy vector with a mass and a velocity that conform to the laws of orbital mechanics. It has travelled for tens of thousands of years through the absolute zero of the Oort cloud, a place where time itself seems to have frozen shortly after the birth of the Sun. For eons, it remained a dormant fragment of primordial ice and dust, one of countless trillions of such remnants circling in the silent dark. But a slight gravitational nudge, perhaps the distant passage of a star or the subtle tug of a giant planet, has unravelled its ancient orbit, casting it inward toward the furnace of the inner system. The intrusion of 3I Atlas into the space between the planets is not an invitation to a spectacle. It is a mechanical inevitability. As it crosses the invisible boundaries of the outer orbits, it enters a region of space governed by the relentless pull of the Sun. The solar gravity is a titan that does not negotiate. It draws the comet inward, accelerating it through the vacuum with a force that is both silent and absolute. This is the symphony of the abyss, where the only music is the friction of light and the tension of space-time. The intruder is now a part of the clockwork, a gear that has finally engaged with the teeth of the central machine. On the screens in the control rooms of the late 2024 era, the comet appears only as a dot, a mathematical point shifting against the static background of the eternal stars. It is an insignificant speck when compared to the vastness of the void it traverses, yet its presence is a reminder of the inherent instability of our cosmic neighbourhood. We exist in a momentary clearing within a forest of debris. The history of the universe is a history of collisions, of small bodies being devoured by larger ones, and of the slow, grinding decay of order into entropy. The telescope is our only shield against this reality, a lonely sentinel recording the approach of the inevitable. As the Sun begins to reclaim this lost child of the primordial mist, the comet experiences a violent transformation. The heat of the star, which sustains life on our pale blue dot, is a destructive force for a wanderer made of ice. The surface of the intruder begins to crack under the thermal stress. Volatiles that have remained solid for millions of years now sublimate, erupting into space as jets of gas and dust. This is the beginning of the coma, a shimmering shroud that masks the cold, hard reality of the nucleus beneath. The machine on Mauna Loa captures this change, recording the increasing brightness not as beauty, but as an increase in the object's magnitude. There is no mercy in the physics of this encounter. The Sun does not welcome the comet, it flays it. The solar wind, a stream of charged particles moving at millions of miles per hour, strikes the emerging shroud of 3I Atlas, stripping away the gas and pushing it back into a tail that stretches for millions of miles. To the ancients, this would be a sword of fire in the heavens, a portent of doom. To the modern observer, it is a laboratory of the early solar system, a remnant of the raw materials that once formed the planets. But both perspectives are eclipsed by the cold truth of the mechanism itself. The comet is being consumed by the very energy that gives it its temporary brilliance. It is a candle being burned at both ends by the gravity and radiation of a star that will eventually consume the entire system. We watch from our vantage point at the edge of the lens, peering through the atmosphere of a world that is itself a passenger in this vast, dark journey. The telescope, the astronomer, and the data are all part of a brief flickering of consciousness in an otherwise silent epoch. The vacuum does not care if we name the comet, nor does it care if the comet eventually strikes a planet or vanishes back into the abyss. The laws of the cosmos are indifferent to the survival of the witness. The intruder moves through the inner solar system's gears with the same lack of purpose as a pebble falling down a well. Yet, there is a certain majesty in the sheer scale of the catastrophe that the comet represents. It is a piece of the original chaos, a fragment of the dark tapestry that existed before the first heartbeat of the first living cell. Its arrival in late 2024 is a reminder that we are never truly safe, only temporarily unobserved. The machine on Hawaii continues its scan, its motors whirring in the thin air, a testament to our desire to know the face of the void before it reaches for us. We are the sentinels of a lonely outpost, mapping the movements of a universe that is as beautiful as it is lethal. As 3I Atlas reaches its perihelion, the point of its closest approach to the Sun, the tension reaches its zenith. The gravitational forces at this distance are enough to tear a fragile body asunder. It is a trial by fire, a moment where the intruder must either survive the solar embrace or be shattered into a cloud of dust, a mere memory in the records of the telescope. The outcome is dictated by the density of the ice and the structural integrity of the primordial rock, variables in an equation that was written at the dawn of time. We are merely the spectators of this unfolding logic, watching as the silent intruder glides through the fire, a ghost in the machine of the heavens, forever bound to the inexorable laws of the dark. The calculations confirmed what the astronomers had dared to whisper. This was no ordinary traveller. The trajectory was too fast, the angle of approach too steep. It did not belong to the family of the sun. It was an outsider, a relic from the vastness beyond our borders. In the annals of our observations, it was designated 3I Atlas, the third interstellar visitor ever recorded by the flickering eyes of our civilization. It followed in the wake of the strange cigar-shaped wanderer of 2017 and the rogue comet of 2019, appearing as yet another ghost in the machine of our solar system. But whereas its predecessors were fleeting shadows, 3I Atlas offered a clearer window into the terrifying physics of the void. It is a messenger from a different reality, one governed by the same laws but forged under the light of a different star. To find the origin of this intruder, we must cast our minds back 50,000 years, to a time when the first ancestors of modern humans were only just beginning to master the secrets of fire. While we were looking at the flickering shadows on cave walls, 3I Atlas was experiencing its own violent birth in the Alpha Centauri system. It began its existence as a humble fragment of ice and dust within a distant debris disk, a cold ring of material orbiting the triple suns of our nearest stellar neighbour. There, in the silent suburbs of that alien system, the comet was a mere cog in a much larger mechanism. Its fate was decided not by any grand design, but by the cold, mathematical certainty of a gravitational encounter. A massive planet, or perhaps the tug of the binary stars themselves, reached out with an invisible hand and altered its course. In an instant the fragment was accelerated, gaining a velocity that the local gravity could no longer restrain. It was a cosmic ejection, a brutal expulsion that sent the comet screaming away from its home and into the absolute oblivion of interstellar space. The journey that followed is almost impossible to grasp. Between the stars lies the abyss, a vacuum so perfect and a darkness so absolute that it defies human imagination. For 50,000 years, 3I Atlas crossed this nothingness. It traversed the light years not as a ship with a destination, but as a discarded pebble in a dark ocean. In this space there is no heat to melt the ice, no wind to stir the dust, and no light to mark the passage of the eons. The comet became a silent sentinel of the void, a frozen vault containing the chemical signatures of a star system we may never visit. It drifted through the great silence, a witness to the birth and death of stars it could never reach. The sheer scale of this isolation is the scale paradox of our existence. While we measure our lives in decades and our history in centuries, the comet measures its journey in the slow, inexorable march of cosmic time. Now, as it enters the domain of our sun, the velocity of the outsider becomes its defining characteristic. It is moving at a speed that ensures it can never be captured. It is not bound by the elliptical orbits that keep the planets in their places. Instead, it follows a hyperbolic path, a wide, open curve that touches our reality for a brief moment before vanishing forever. This is the ruthless machine of celestial mechanics at work. The sun's gravity acts like a lens, bending the comet's path but unable to tether it. It is a kinetic energy so vast that even the immense mass of our star is merely a temporary distraction. 3I Atlas is a bullet passing through a cloud of smoke, indifferent to the world it transits. The contrast between its origin and its current lonely trajectory reveals the true nature of the cosmos. We often think of the universe as a stable, orderly place, a tapestry of stars fixed in the night sky. But 3I Atlas reminds us that the universe is a place of perpetual motion and violent displacement. It is a system of gears where the smallest parts are often cast out into the dark. 50,000 years ago, this comet was part of something larger. Today, it is a solitary wanderer, a fragment of a lost world moving through the abyss toward an uncertain future. When it leaves our system, it will return to the oblivion from which it came, heading toward the constellations of the far future, never to return. It is a reminder of our own fragile place in the hierarchy of the stars. We are observers on a small warm rock, watching as the remnants of other worlds slide past us in the night, brief flickers of light in a universe that is mostly shadow. The mechanism of its ejection was an act of cosmic indifference, a byproduct of the same laws that keep our own Earth in its stable orbit. There is no malice in the physics that cast this comet out, and no mercy in the vacuum that preserved it. It is simply the way of the machine. The comet carries within it the primordial record of Alpha Centauri, a chemical fingerprint of another sun's birth, yet it will never deliver that message to anyone who can truly understand it. It is a letter addressed to the void, intercepted by our telescopes for a few weeks before it is lost once more. As we track its movement against the backdrop of the eternal stars, we are forced to confront the reality of the abyss. The space between the stars is not just empty, it is a graveyard of things that were once part of a system, now destined to wander until the end of time. 3. Atlas is a ghost, a reminder that for every world that thrives under the light of a star, there are countless fragments cast out into the dark, forever falling through the silent, cold tapestry of the universe. The wanderer has reached the threshold where the silence of the void is broken by the roar of the star. For eons, this frozen remnant of a distant epoch existed in a state of perfect stasis, a crystalline vault holding the secrets of a primordial world. But as it falls deeper into the gravity well of our solar system, it approaches a boundary that marks the end of its preservation and the beginning of its dissolution. This is the frost line, an invisible frontier located at approximately 2.7 astronomical units from the solar furnace. It is the point of no return, a geographical limit in the geometry of the cosmos where the rain of ice is overthrown by the sovereignty of fire. Beyond this line, the sun is no longer a distant point of light. It is a titan of energy, a relentless machine that begins to dismantle any object that dares to cross its perimeter. The crossing of this boundary is not a gentle event, it is a celestial execution. As the distance between the comet and the sun narrows to 2.7 astronomical units, the solar wind and the flood of high-energy photons cease to be mere background radiation and become a focused instrument of change. The radiation acts as a scalpel, a blade of light that begins to cut into the ancient dark crust of the visitor. For billions of years, the comet was a solid entity, a monolithic shard of water ice, frozen carbon dioxide and silicate dust. But the physics of the frost line dictates that this state of matter can no longer persist. The machine of the sun demands a toll, and that toll is paid in the very substance of the comet itself. Within the dark, porous interior of the comet, a violent transition begins. This is the process of sublimation, a phase change that bypasses the stability of the liquid state entirely. In the vacuum of space, there is no atmospheric pressure to hold the molecules together as they warm. Instead, the solid ice turns directly into gas. This is not a slow melting like a glacier on Earth. It is a rapid, explosive awakening. The solar scalpel penetrates the outer layers of dust, reaching the volatile ices buried beneath. As the temperature rises, these ices vanish into vapor, expanding with a force that the comet's fragile structure was never designed to contain. The internal pressure builds within the veins of the rock, a frantic and desperate expansion of gas seeking escape into the abyss. The comet, once a silent sentinel of the deep dark, begins to scream in the language of physics. The pressure from within creates cracks that spiderweb across the surface, erupting in jets of gas and dust that reach kilometers into the void. This is the birth of the coma, a glowing shroud of material that marks the beginning of the comet's visible decay. The sun, in its ruthless indifference, does not care for the history trapped within these frozen layers. It merely processes the comet according to the inexorable laws of thermodynamics. The heat unspools the tapestry of the past, turning the records of another star's birth into a chaotic cloud of debris. The machine of the cosmos is at work here, transforming potential energy into kinetic violence and solid memory into fleeting shadow. At 2.7 astronomical units, the intensity of the light is enough to ignite the surface in a metaphorical sense. The comet is being devoured by the very light that sustains life on our own world. This is the scale paradox of the solar system. The same energy that drives the photosynthesis of a leaf is a destructive force that unravels the integrity of a cosmic wanderer. The radiation does not just warm the surface, it agitates the molecules until they can no longer remain tethered to the nucleus. They are cast out, stripped away from the body that carried them through the void for 50,000 years. What was once a singular object is now becoming a trail of ghosts, a remnant of a world that is literally coming apart at the seams. The internal pressure is perhaps the most tragic aspect of this transformation. Deep inside the nucleus, the cold of the interstellar abyss still lingers, a remnant of the absolute zero that defined the comet's long journey. But the exterior is being scorched, creating a thermal gradient so extreme that the structural integrity of the rock is compromised. The comet is caught in a vice between the primordial cold of its heart and the solar fire of its skin. This tension is a microcosm of the universe itself, a struggle between the entropy of the void and the creative, destructive power of the stars. The comet is a victim of the machine, a small cog being crushed by the larger gears of the solar system's mechanics. As we observe this crossing from our vantage point on Earth, we are witnessing the unravelling of an ancient message. The comet carries the chemical fingerprint of a time before the Earth was formed, a period of chaos and creation in the far reaches of the galaxy. But as it passes the frost line at 2.7 astronomical units, that message is being shredded. The gases that escape into space take with them the primordial dust, the heavy elements, and the complex molecules that might have been the building blocks of life in another system. It is a loss of information, an erasure of history executed with the precision of a surgeon. The sun is not just a source of light, it is a catalyst for the catastrophe of change. The transition from solid to gas is a violent manifestation of the universe's refusal to remain static. Nothing is permitted to stay the same forever. The comet's journey through the silence was an epoch of preservation, but that epoch has ended. Now it enters the era of the furnace. The brightness of the coma increases, reflecting the solar light and creating a spectacle that hides the underlying destruction. We see a beautiful streak in the sky, a celestial firework that captivates the human imagination. But the reality is a ruthless mechanism of decay. The comet is losing mass at a rate of tons per second, its very essence being bled out into the vacuum. It is a sacrifice to the star, an offering made of ice and time. This is the melancholic optimism of the cosmic perspective. We recognize the beauty of the comet's tail, the shimmering veil of gas that stretches across millions of kilometers, even as we acknowledge that this beauty is the product of a slow and inexorable death. The comet must be destroyed to be seen. It must lose itself to become a part of the visible symphony of the heavens. In the vast abyss of the universe, existence is often defined by these brief, violent encounters between the cold remnants of the past and the burning energy of the present. 3i Atlas is a witness to this truth, a messenger that is being consumed by the very act of its delivery. As it continues its hyperbolic path, leaving the 2.7 astronomical unit marker behind, the comet is no longer the object it was. It is a changing entity, a fragment of a lost world that is being reshaped by the solar wind. The sun's gravity continues to pull it forward, while its radiation continues to push it apart. This is the dual nature of the star, a tether and a scalpel, a father and an executioner. The comet is caught in the middle, a tiny, fragile machine of ice being processed by the massive, indifferent machine of the sun. The silence of its long journey has been replaced by the roar of sublimation, a soundless scream that echoes through the void as the visitor from the dark is welcomed by the fire. As the solar furnace intensifies its assault, the comet begins to bleed its most intimate secrets into the abyss. This is no mere evaporation. It is the systematic dismantling of a primordial chemical factory. The spectral signature, captured by the cold eyes of our distant observatories, reveals a composition that is both beautiful and terrifying. Within the expanding veil of the coma, we detect the heavy presence of carbon monoxide and cyanogen. These are the raw, unrefined chemicals of a cold universe, the fundamental components of a celestial alchemy that preceded the very concept of biology. To the human observer, these are names synonymous with lethality, the very essence of poison, but in the ruthless machine of the cosmos, they are simply the common currency of the void. The comet is a messenger of an indifferent reality. As it sheds its outer layers, it releases vast quantities of carbon monoxide, a molecule consisting of a single carbon atom bonded to a single oxygen atom. In the oxygen-rich environment of our home world, this gas is a silent killer, an invisible spectre that displaces the breath of life. Yet, in the interstellar medium, it is the second most abundant molecule in the universe, surpassed only by molecular hydrogen. It is the exhaust of the star-forming process, a byproduct of the massive gravitational collapses that ignite new suns. The comet has carried this gas in its frozen heart for billions of years, a relic of the ancient nebula that birthed our solar system. Now, as the heat of the sun penetrates its porous structure, the carbon monoxide is liberated, expanding into the vacuum with an inexorable pressure. Beside it flows the cyanogen, a compound of carbon and nitrogen linked by a triple bond of immense strength. When exposed to the ultraviolet radiation of the sun, these molecules dissociate, creating the radical that glows with a ghostly electric blue light. This is the source of the comet's eerie radiance, a luminescence that has historically been interpreted as an omen of doom. We remember the panic of 1910 when the Earth was predicted to pass through the tail of Halley's comet. The mere mention of cyanogen in the celestial wake sent tremors through the collective human psyche. People sealed their windows and doors, fearing the arrival of a toxic fog that would extinguish all life. They saw the comet as a celestial assassin, a harbinger of a mass extinction delivered by the hand of a vengeful sky. But the universe does not possess the capacity for vengeance. It is a machine that operates without regard for the fragile life that clings to the surfaces of its planets. The cyanogen and the carbon monoxide are not weapons. They are the fundamental building blocks of a structural reality that is far older and more vast than the thin layer of gas we call our atmosphere. To the comet, these toxins are simply its substance. To the sun, they are simply matter to be energized and scattered. The fear felt by those in 1910 was a projection of human fragility onto a landscape of total indifference. The tail of a comet is so diffuse that it is, for all practical purposes, a perfect vacuum. The amount of poison it carries is negligible when compared to the vastness of the space it traverses. However, there is a deeper, more profound irony hidden within this toxic flow. While these gases are lethal to the complex organisms that have evolved within the protective cradle of Earth, they are the very precursors of that same life. This is the alchemy of poison. In the frozen laboratories of the outer solar system, these simple molecules are the starting materials for more complex organic chemistry. Carbon monoxide, when subjected to the harsh conditions of space, can be transformed into the precursors of amino acids. Cyanogen can serve as a building block for the nucleobases that form the rungs of the DNA ladder. The very substances that would kill us today are the ancestors of the molecules that made our existence possible 4 billion years ago. The machine of the universe is not concerned with the paradox of its own creations. It does not distinguish between the poison and the cure. It merely processes matter and energy through the mechanism of time. The comet is a vessel of these prebiotic materials, a delivery system that has, throughout the history of the Earth, bombarded our world with the raw ingredients of life. We are the descendants of this celestial exhaust. We are the products of the same carbon and nitrogen that now glow with a lethal light in the wake of the comet. To look upon the cyanogen glow of 3i Atlas is to look upon the primordial soup of our own origins, cast out into the freezing void. This realization brings with it a sense of melancholic optimism. We are small, vulnerable beings inhabiting a world that can be snuffed out by a shift in chemical balance. Yet we are made of the same resilient stuff that survives the vacuum of space for eons. The universe is a ruthless machine, yes, but it is also a creative one. It produces the ingredients of consciousness in the same breath that it produces the agents of oblivion. The comet is not an intruder in our system. It is a relative, a distant cousin that has remained in the cold dark while we flourished in the warmth. It carries the unedited manuscript of the solar system's history, written in the language of toxic gases and frozen dust. As the comet nears its perihelion, the rate of sublimation increases. The internal pressures build until the comet's nucleus can no longer contain the expanding gases. It begins to fragment, shedding large chunks of ice and rock that trail behind it like the debris of a shipwreck. Each fragment becomes a mini-comet, its own source of cyanogen and carbon monoxide, contributing to the growing majesty of the tail. The spectacle is magnificent, a testament to the power of the sun and the fragility of the visitor. From our perspective, it is a once-in-a-century event, a moment of wonder that breaks the monotony of the night sky. But for the comet, it is the final act of a long and lonely journey. It is being dismantled by the very light that makes it visible. The silent vacuum of the solar system is filled with the roar of this chemical disintegration. The carbon monoxide molecules, once locked in a cage of water ice, now vibrate with the energy of the sun, leaping into the void at incredible speeds. They collide with the solar wind, becoming ionized and being swept back into a straight, narrow ion tail that points directly away from the sun. This tail, often tinged with the blue of ionized carbon monoxide, is a physical manifestation of the sun's invisible power. It is a tether of light and gas that connects the small, icy body to the massive star at the center of the machine. In this vast, unfeeling mechanism, we find ourselves as the only witnesses. We are the observers who name the poisons and fear the light. We are the ones who find meaning in the chemical composition of a ball of ice. The comet does not know it is beautiful. It does not know it is toxic. It simply is. It follows the path dictated by gravity and the laws of thermodynamics, moving toward its eventual dissolution. The alchemy of poison is just another process in a universe defined by change. As the comet fades into the distance or vanishes into the solar fire, it leaves behind a trail of atoms that will eventually find their way into other worlds, perhaps to become the seeds of new life in some distant epoch. The cycle of the machine continues, inexorable and eternal, turning the poisons of today into the possibilities of tomorrow. As the comet crosses the invisible threshold into the inner sanctum of our solar system, the sun, a silent sentinel of primordial fire, begins its final assault upon the traveller's icy armour. The transformation is as sudden as it is terrifying. The frozen heart of the wanderer, which has known only the absolute stillness of the void for eons, is now subjected to a radiation so intense that it bypasses the liquid phase entirely. The ice turns directly into gas, geysering out from fissures in the crust like the steam from 1,000 dying engines. This is the moment the emerald shroud is born, a spectral radiance that clings to the nucleus like a funeral veil. This verdant glow is not the comforting green of a terrestrial forest or the vibrant hue of a spring morning. It is a chemical scream, a manifestation of the ruthless machine that is our universe. As the sun's ultraviolet rays strike the escaping vapours, they tear apart the molecules of diatomic carbon and cyanogen. In this violent decoupling, the atoms are forced to shed their excess energy, releasing a ghostly light that illuminates the surrounding abyss. To an observer, it is a vision of haunting beauty, but in reality it is a signature of catastrophe. The comet is being dismantled at the molecular level, its very substance sacrificed to the hungry light of the star. Now we must confront the scale paradox that defines this celestial apparition. At the centre of this display lies a nucleus of rock and ice no more than 10 kilometres across, a mere speck of dust in the grand architecture of the cosmos. Yet, the tail that now streams behind it has grown to a length of over 1,200,000 kilometres. It is a staggering imbalance, a triumph of the ethereal over the solid. If we were to scale the nucleus down to the size of a single pebble, its tail would stretch for leagues across the horizon, a shimmering bridge of ghosts. This is the mechanism of the universe at its most deceptive, taking a tiny remnant of the solar system's birth and expanding its presence until it occupies a volume of space vast enough to swallow our own moon 10 times over. The mass of the comet is negligible, a rounding error in the physics of the galaxy, yet its visual impact is titanic. It is a whisper that has been amplified into a roar by the energy of a star. Within this emerald shroud drifts a structure of even greater complexity, a secondary tail composed not of gas, but of dust. These are trillions of microscopic silica needles, shards of glass and mineral that were forged in the heart of dying stars long before our sun was even a glimmer in a primordial cloud. These needles are the skeletal remains of the ancient world, and they follow the comet like a ghost of a structure. They are so fine that they are lighter than the smoke of a dying candle, yet they are the hard evidence of a violent history. As the pressure of sunlight pushes against these microscopic fragments, they are sorted by size and weight, forming a curved golden path that traces the comet's journey through the silent vacuum. This dust tail is a tapestry of light and shadow, a silent symphony played out across the heavens. Each silica needle reflects the sun's rays, contributing to a collective brilliance that belies the fragility of the individual parts. It is a beauty born entirely of destruction. The comet must die so that the tail may live. It must be unravelled, atom by atom, shard by shard, to create this temporary monument in the sky. The universe does not care for the preservation of the individual, it cares only for the inexorable flow of energy and the transformation of matter. The comet is a victim of the very light that makes it visible to us, a martyr to the laws of thermodynamics. We stand as the lonely witnesses to this slow-motion decay. In the vast, unfeeling mechanism of the cosmos, we are the only ones who find meaning in the emerald glow. We see the scales of the paradox and feel a sense of profound melancholy, knowing that this spectacle is a one-way process. The ice that is now glowing green will never return to its frozen cradle. The silica needles that catch the light will eventually drift apart, scattered into the eternal dark of the interstellar void, lost to the abyss forever. This is the nature of the ruthless machine. It creates masterpieces only to grind them back into the dust from which they came. The emerald shroud is a reminder that beauty in the universe is often a byproduct of entropy. The most magnificent sights are frequently the most transient, the results of a system reaching its breaking point. As the comet continues its dive toward the sun, the tail will grow even longer, perhaps reaching out for 10 million kilometers, a thin ribbon of glass and gas stretched to the point of transparency. It is a fragile bridge between the primordial past and the inevitable oblivion of the future. The scale of the tail, so disproportionate to the tiny rock that birthed it, serves as a metaphor for consciousness itself. Like the comet, we are small, insignificant beings, yet through our observation and our understanding, we project a presence that spans the light years. We are the emerald glow of a silent universe, a brief flash of light in a dark that knows no end. As the epoch of the comet's passage reaches its zenith, the interaction between the solar wind and the ion tail becomes more frantic. The blue-tinged ribbon of gas vibrates and kinks, responding to the invisible magnetic fields that permeate the solar system. It is a dance of ghosts, a visible manifestation of the sun's invisible power. The emerald shroud deepens in hue as the concentration of diatomic carbon reaches its peak. For a few weeks, this visitor is the most luminous object in the local neighbourhood, a sentinel of the deep dark that has been ignited by the fires of the centre. But the machine is inexorable. The heat continues to rise, and the internal pressures within the nucleus continue to build. The beauty we see is the skin of a dying world. Every kilometre of that 1,200,000 kilometre tail is a kilometre of lost history, a piece of the primordial manuscript that has been burned to provide us with a few moments of wonder. We watch the unravelling with a mixture of awe and sorrow, recognising that we are witnessing the final act of a journey that began 4,500,000,000 years ago. The comet has survived the cold of the outer reaches for eons, only to be consumed in a matter of months by the very star that gave the solar system life. This is the melancholic optimism of the cosmic observer. We recognise the ruthlessness of the mechanism, the cold indifference of the laws that govern the stars and the dust. We see the catastrophe for what it is, and yet we cannot look away. The emerald light, the trillions of silica needles, and the vast-scale paradox of the tail all speak to a universe that is capable of creating sublime order from the chaos of its own self-destruction. The comet will soon be gone, its atoms scattered, its emerald shroud dissolved into the blackness of the abyss. But for this brief moment, it stands as a testament to the power of light and the persistence of matter. It is a beautiful remnant of a forgotten age, lighting up the void one last time before it is reclaimed by the eternal silence. The cycle continues, the machine turns, and the emerald light fades, leaving only the memory of a ghost in the eyes of those who dare to look up. Beneath the aesthetic grace of the emerald shroud lies a violent and mechanical reality. The comet is no longer a passive passenger on a rail of gravity. As the solar furnace intensifies, the primordial ice buried deep within the nucleus does not merely melt, it sublimates, transitioning instantly from a frozen solid to an expansive gas. This process creates an internal pressure that the fragile, porous structure of the rock cannot sustain. The result is the birth of the jet, a frantic and localized eruption that transforms the silent sentinel into a vessel of chaos. These jets are the uncontrolled thrusters of a dying ship, venting into the void with a ferocity that defies the elegant stillness of the stars. The mechanism of this outgassing is as ruthless as it is beautiful. Within the dark, frigid interior of the nucleus, pockets of volatile carbon monoxide and frozen water have remained dormant for 4,500,000,000 years. As the sun's warmth penetrates the insulating crust of dust and silicate, these ancient reservoirs ignite in a thermodynamic frenzy. They find weak points in the surface, bursting through the lithic skin in geysers of vapour and crystal. Because the nucleus is an irregular, tumbling mass, these jets do not fire with any sense of symmetry. They erupt from the sunward side, from the shadows, and from the deep crevices of the comet's waist, creating a three-dimensional tapestry of force that pushes against the very fabric of the comet's trajectory. This is the jet effect, a phenomenon that introduces a profound uncertainty into the clockwork of the cosmos. For centuries, the masters of celestial mechanics believed that the movements of the heavens were governed by the inexorable and predictable laws of gravity. They traced the paths of the planets with mathematical precision, seeing the universe as a grand, eternal machine. But the comet is a ghost in the machine. As the jets fire, they act as tiny, erratic engines, providing a thrust that gravity did not mandate. This non-gravitational force nudges the comet, shifting its path by thousands of kilometers, making the task of tracing its journey through the dark an exercise in approximation and humility. The struggle is palpable. We witness a small ancient rock attempting to navigate a path through the abyss, while its own body is being torn apart by internal pressures. The comet wobbles and precesses, its rotation altered by the torque of these ghostly thrusters. One moment, a jet may fire from the leading edge, slowing the descent. The next, an eruption from the flank sends the nucleus into a frantic, uneven spin. It is a dance of instability, a three-dimensional struggle against the cold indifference of the solar system's orbital lanes. The vacuum of space offers no resistance to these jets, allowing the gas to expand at supersonic speeds, carrying with it the dust and the history of the outer reaches. To observe this orbital chaos is to witness the unravelling of order. The path of the comet becomes a testament to the unpredictable nature of matter when it is subjected to the fury of a star. Astronomers who seek to predict the exact moment of the comet's closest approach find themselves battling a phantom variable. They must account for the density of the jets, the duration of the eruptions, and the changing mass of the nucleus as it sheds its very substance into the void. It is a reminder that even in a universe governed by iron laws, there is a place for the erratic and the unknown. The comet is a rogue element, a wild card in the celestial deck, proving that the vacuum is never truly empty when the fires of a sun are involved. The three-dimensional nature of these jets creates a complex geometry of motion. Unlike a rocket designed by human hands, which directs its force with intent and calculation, the comet vents in every direction at once. It is a sphere of expanding frustration, a cloud of silica needles and frozen vapour that obscures the very heart of the object. This shroud makes it nearly impossible to see the nucleus directly. leaving observers to infer the violence occurring within by the way the entire structure shifts and sways against the background of distant galaxies. We see the effect, but the cause remains hidden beneath a veil of its own making. The difficulty of tracing a path through the dark is not merely a matter of distance, it is a matter of the comet's own self-destruction. As the comet nears the Sun, the frequency of these eruptions increases. The nucleus becomes a sieve, leaking its soul into the abyss. Each jet is a signature of a specific epoch, a release of materials that have not seen the light of day since the dawn of the solar system. The outgassing is a bridge between the deep past and the immediate present, but it is a bridge that is collapsing even as it is crossed. The struggle against the predictable orbits is a losing one. No matter how many jets fire, no matter how much the comet wobbles or veers, the Sun remains the ultimate master. The gravity of the star is a heavy hand that will not be denied, pulling the erratic traveller toward a destiny that is as certain as it is catastrophic. We are left to contemplate the scale paradox of this moment. A small rock, only a few kilometres in diameter, is capable of generating enough force to alter its own cosmic destiny, if only by a fraction. It is a tiny rebellion against the ruthless machine of the universe. The jets are the voice of the comet, a silent scream of vapour and dust as it is devoured by the light. In the vastness of the cosmos, this struggle might seem insignificant, a mere flicker of motion in an ocean of stillness. Yet, for the observer, it is a profound manifestation of the tension between the individual object and the laws that govern the whole. The difficulty of navigating the dark is a metaphor for the human condition. We too are propelled by internal forces we do not fully understand, venting our energy into a universe that is often indifferent to our trajectory. We struggle against the gravity of our circumstances, our paths altered by the eruptions of our own nature. Like the comet, we are composed of ancient materials, remnants of a primordial age, trying to find our way through a void that offers no maps and no mercy. The orbital chaos of the comet is a reflection of the chaos within ourselves, a reminder that the journey is often defined more by the struggle than by the destination. As the epoch of the passage continues, the jets will eventually exhaust themselves. The reservoirs of ice will run dry, the internal pressures will fade, and the nucleus will be left as a scorched, inert husk. But for now, the engines of the deep are firing. The comet is alive with the energy of its own decay, a bright and erratic sentinel marking its path with the dust of its ancestors. We watch the flickering light, the kinking tail, and the sudden shifts in position with a sense of awe, recognizing that we are seeing the very essence of the cosmos in motion. It is a symphony of gas and gravity, a tapestry of motion woven from the threads of catastrophe. The machine turns, the sun burns, and the comet continues its frantic, beautiful, and doomed rebellion against the silence of the abyss. But as the traveller descends further into the gravity well, it enters a realm where light is no longer merely a guide, but a physical weight. The sun is not a passive observer of this frantic journey. It is the master sculptor of the solar system, a celestial artist whose tools are not made of steel or stone, but of invisible fields and torrential winds. Here, the comet is no longer just a melting stone. It becomes a canvas, a medium upon which the star exerts its primal and terrifying influence. The relationship between the two is not one of simple warmth, but a violent, transformative process that tears at the very fabric of the comet's identity. The space surrounding the sun is not an empty void, though it may appear so to the naked eye. It is filled with the solar wind, a relentless stream of charged particles flowing outward at nearly 1,600,000 kilometers per hour. This is the breath of the star, an invisible tide of electrons and protons that floods the abyss. As the comet's outgassing increases, the liberated molecules are struck by the high-energy photons and the rushing particles of the solar wind. They are stripped of their electrons, becoming ionized, glowing with an ethereal and ghostly blue light. In this moment, the comet is no longer a singular object. It has become a sprawling, electrified ghost, its tail stretching across millions of kilometers of the dark. The sun begins its work. The magnetic field of the star, a complex and twisting web of invisible force, reaches out to grasp this newly formed plasma. We must imagine the solar wind as a series of rushing, turbulent rivers, each carrying its own magnetic signature. When these fields encounter the ionized debris of the comet, they do not simply pass through. They tangle, they snag. The sun's magnetic field acts as a series of chisels, carving the comet's tail into a frantic and ever-changing architecture of turbulent ribbons. The once straight path of the vapour is broken and bent, forced into intricate, kinking patterns that ripple like silk in a storm. This is the symphony of the solar sculptor. It is a performance played out on a scale that defies human comprehension, where the movements of a single magnetic line can snap and whip 1,000,000 kilometres of gas into a new configuration in a matter of hours. The comet's tail becomes a tapestry of motion, a chaotic and beautiful record of the sun's invisible fury. We see the interaction as a dance, but for the comet, it is a process of relentless excavation. The solar wind is tearing the comet apart, atom by atom, grain by grain, and weaving those remnants into a display of cosmic art that serves no purpose other than to demonstrate the power of the machine. The sculptor does not work with grace or mercy. The interaction is characterized by magnetic reconnection, a process where the field lines snap and reform, releasing tremendous bursts of energy that can detach entire sections of the tail. These disconnected ribbons of plasma are cast off into the void, drifting away like discarded shards of marble from a half-finished statue. The comet, a sentinel of the primordial past, is being slowly unravelled by the very light that makes it visible. Every beautiful twist in the tail is a mark of destruction. Every vibrant ribbon is a piece of the comet that will never return to the nucleus. We observe this from our distant vantage point, caught in the scale paradox of the event. To us, the comet's tail is a delicate and shimmering veil, a silent testament to the wonders of the cosmos. But if we were to stand within that stream of ions, we would find ourselves in a place of unimaginable violence. The atmosphere of the comet is a battleground, where the ancient ice of the deep past meets the modern raging energy of the star. It is a collision of epochs. The primordial materials, frozen since the dawn of the solar system 4,500,000,000 years ago, are being ignited and discarded by a star that is in the prime of its life. The sun's magnetic influence is an inexorable force, a silent mechanism that dictates the geometry of the heavens. It reminds us that nothing in the universe exists in isolation. Even the most lonely traveller drifting through the abyss for eons is eventually claimed by the fields and forces of the larger structures. The comet is a remnant of a forgotten age, but the sun is the master of the present. As the solar sculptor carves the debris into turbulent ribbons, it is erasing the history of the comet and replacing it with its own signature. The tapestry of the tail is not the comet's story. It is the sun's poem, written in the language of ionized gas and magnetic tension. There is a profound melancholy in this transformation. The comet has survived for billions of years in the cold, dark silence of the Oort cloud, preserved in a state of perfect frozen integrity. Now, in a few short months of proximity to the sun, it is being devoured and reshaped. The very thing that gives the comet its glory, the magnificent sweeping tail, is the very thing that is killing it. The sun is an artist that destroys its subject in the act of painting it. The ribbons of gas are the screams of a dying world, rendered into a visual symphony that we find breathtakingly beautiful. In this cosmic act of creation and destruction, we find a reflection of the ruthless machine that is the universe. Entropy is not always a slow and quiet decay. Sometimes it is a violent and spectacular unravelling. The solar wind does not care for the history of the ice it strikes. The magnetic fields do not respect the ancient lineage of the dust they twist. The sun simply is, and its nature is to radiate, to push, and to sculpt whatever dares to enter its domain. The comet is merely the latest piece of clay to be placed upon the wheel, and the result is a fleeting, magnificent catastrophe. As we watch the tail kinking and snapping in the solar wind, we are reminded of our own place within the tapestry. We too are composed of materials that were once part of a larger whole, carved and shaped by forces far beyond our control. We are the products of stellar winds and ancient collisions, our lives a brief and turbulent ribbon of a light in the long history of the cosmos. Like the comet, we are being unravelled by the very environment that sustains us, our energy being spent to create a momentary pattern in the void. The sun continues its work, its magnetic chisels never resting. The ribbons of the comet's tail grow longer and more complex, a shimmering map of the invisible currents of space. The traveller is now deep within the heart of the solar system, a scorched and weary sentinel being stripped of its last defences. The abyss ahead is bright with the fire of the star, and the silence is filled with the roar of the solar wind. The sculpture is almost complete, but the cost has been everything the comet ever was. We are left to wonder if the beauty of the tapestry justifies the destruction of the thread, or if in the grand mechanism of the universe, such distinctions have no meaning at all. The star burns, the wind blows, and the comet's remains are scattered into the eternal dark, leaving behind only the memory of a symphony written in light. To look upon the emerald luminescence of the comet is to be seduced by a grand cosmic illusion. We perceive a vibrant, ghostly flame against the velvet dark, a spectral traveller fighting for its existence against the crushing might of a star. Yet, beneath the veil of this breathtaking display, lies the cold, mathematical reality of the mechanism. The universe does not deal in beauty. It deals in the exchange of energy and the inevitable increase of entropy. The vibrant green phantom that haunts the inner solar system is not a sign of vitality or a defiant cry against the dark. It is merely the result of a precise and indifferent rearrangement of carbon and nitrogen atoms, a chemical reaction triggered by the relentless bombardment of ultraviolet radiation. As the comet nears the Sun, the heat causes the primordial ice to sublimate, releasing trapped molecules into the vacuum. Among these are simple combinations of carbon and nitrogen. When the fierce light of the star strikes these molecules, it tears them asunder in a process of molecular divorce. The resulting diatomic carbon, two atoms of carbon locked in a brief and desperate embrace, absorbs the sunlight and re-radiates it in the specific wavelengths that our eyes perceive as emerald. This is not a miracle, it is the operation of a ruthless machine. The green glow is the visual signature of destruction. The light emitted as the very fabric of the comet's chemistry is shredded by the solar forge. The universe is indifferent to whether we find this process beautiful or terrifying. To the cosmos, there is no distinction between the birth of a star and the decay of a comet. There is only the inexorable flow of energy from states of concentrated order to states of vast, scattered chaos. This is the fundamental law of the abyss, the second law of thermodynamics, which dictates that the total entropy of an isolated system can never decrease. The comet, once a highly organized relic of the primordial epoch, is being systematically dismantled to satisfy this cosmic requirement. The order that was preserved for 4,500,000,000 years is being traded for the disorder of the solar wind. Every glowing particle in the tail is a debt being paid to the void. We often speak of life and death as if they are meaningful categories in the grand tapestry, but the ruthless machine recognizes only the transition of states. A living cell is a complex arrangement of atoms that temporarily resists the pull of equilibrium. A dying comet is a complex arrangement of ice and dust that is finally succumbing to it. Both are subject to the same mechanical necessity. The sun does not hate the comet, nor does it seek to destroy it out of malice. The star is a massive engine of fusion, radiating energy because its internal pressure and gravity demand it. The comet is simply an obstacle in the path of that radiation, a minor gear being ground down by the rotation of a much larger wheel. In this perspective, the concept of a catastrophe loses its human meaning. We see the unravelling of the comet as a tragic loss of an ancient sentinel, but the universe sees only a change in the distribution of matter. The carbon atoms that once formed the frozen heart of the traveller will eventually find themselves scattered across millions of miles of space, perhaps one day becoming part of a new nebula or the atmosphere of a distant world. The machine does not lose its parts, it simply reconfigures them. The sense of melancholy we feel when watching the comet's demise is a product of our own limited perspective, a reflection of our fear of our own inevitable decay. We project our narratives of struggle and loss onto a silent and unfeeling cosmos, seeking purpose in the movements of the spheres. But the void offers no such comfort. It is vast, silent, and utterly indifferent to the definitions of life and death that we cling to so desperately. The scale of this indifference is difficult for the human mind to grasp. We live our lives in a narrow window of time and temperature, believing that our experiences are central to the story of the universe, but the epochs of the stars are measured in billions of years, and the distances between them are measured in trillions of miles. Within this scale, the entire history of our species is but a flicker of a candle in a hurricane. The ruthless machine has been turning since the first ignite of the Big Bang, and it will continue to turn long after the last star has faded into a black dwarf. The comet is a temporary fluctuation in the density of the void, a momentary ripple in the dark ocean. Its destruction is not an end, but a return to the baseline state of the cosmos. The atoms do not mourn their separation. The vacuum does not feel the loss of the light. When we strip away the poetry and the metaphors, we are left with the cold brilliance of physics. The emerald glow is a product of the specific energy levels of electrons jumping between orbits, a phenomenon governed by the same laws that keep the planets in their tracks and the galaxies in their spirals. There is a terrifying precision to this. Every photon emitted by the dying comet can be accounted for. Every joule of heat absorbed can be measured. There is no room for ghost stories or ancient myths in the equations of the abyss. The universe is a tapestry of cause and effect, woven with the threads of mathematical necessity. The comet is being devoured because it must be. The sun shines because it must. The void remains because it is the ultimate destination of all things. As the Sentinel continues its plunge toward the fire, its structural integrity begins to fail. The internal stresses caused by the uneven heating of its core lead to fractures that propagate through the ancient ice. Huge chunks of the comet may break away, creating their own miniature tails before they, too, are unravelled by the solar wind. To a human observer, this might look like a ship breaking apart in a storm, a final struggle against the elements. But in the reality of the machine, it is merely the failure of a material under stress. The ice has a specific tensile strength, and the thermal expansion has exceeded it. The result is a spectacular fragmentation, a catastrophe of light and dust, but it is as predictable as the falling of a stone. This realization brings with it a profound sense of isolation. We are the witnesses to this grand mechanism, the conscious observers who give names to the stars and meaning to the light. But the mechanism does not require our witness to function. The comet would dissolve in the same emerald glow even if there were no eyes to see it. The laws of thermodynamics would continue to drive the universe toward oblivion even if there were no minds to contemplate the meaning of the word. We are a part of the machine that has somehow gained the ability to feel the grinding of the gears. We feel the friction as heat, the movement as time, and the decay as sorrow. Yet the machine remains silent, its inexorable logic driving us forward through the eons toward a future where even the memory of the sun and the comet will be erased. The emerald glow fades as the molecules are further broken down into their constituent atoms, stripped of their identity and cast into the abyss. The carbon and nitrogen that once danced in the green light are now just lonely travellers in the dark, part of the invisible debris that litters the solar system. The comet's story is being unravelled, its chapters torn out and scattered by the wind. In the end, there is only the void, the silent and eternal observer of all transformations. The ruthless machine continues its work, turning the wheel of time, indifferent to the beauty it creates and the history it destroys. We are left to watch the ribbons of light disappear, knowing that we too are governed by the same cold equations. Our lives a brief and glowing rearrangement of the very same atoms, destined for the same magnificent and silent oblivion. The scattered atoms of the comet, those lonely travellers now adrift in the solar wind, do not simply vanish into the oblivion of the deep. They are the recycled debris of a much older story, a story that leads back to the very foundations of the ground beneath our feet. To understand the emerald ghost of the comet is to understand the violent birth of our own world, for the two are forged from the same primordial ledger of chemistry. We often envision the early Earth as a pristine cradle, a quiet place waiting for the spark of life to ignite its oceans. But the reality of the machine is far more terrifying. 4,500,000,000 years ago, Our planet was not a sanctuary. It was a chaotic furnace of lethal gases and molten rock, a place where the air itself was a toxic shroud. The early Earth was a landscape of absolute catastrophe. There was no blue sky, no gentle breeze, and no cooling rain. Instead, the atmosphere was a thick, choking veil of carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia, punctuated by the relentless bombardment of debris left over from the formation of the solar system. This was the era of the Great Bombardment, a time when the heavens rained fire and the crust of the planet was repeatedly unravelled by the kinetic energy of 1,000,000 falling stones. In this hellish epoch, the very ingredients of life were delivered not by a gentle hand, but through the medium of cosmic violence. The same toxic compounds we see trailing behind the dying sentinel, the hydrogen cyanide and the volatile hydrocarbons, were the primary architects of our existence. It is a profound paradox that the precursors of life are, by every human standard, substances of absolute lethality. We are the children of poison. The cyanide that would stop a modern heart in seconds was, in the cauldron of the early Earth, the essential scaffolding for the first complex molecules. Under the glare of a young and furious sun, and amidst the constant discharge of lightning that tore through the methane clouds, these simple toxins began to rearrange themselves. They were driven by the same inexorable logic that governs the orbit of the planets and the decay of the stars. There is no sentiment in the chemistry of the abyss. There is only the movement of electrons and the search for a more stable state. The Earth at this stage was a chaotic cloud that refused to stay still. Even as the surface began to cool into a blackened basaltic crust, the interior remained a roiling mass of heat, driving tectonic plates to collide and subduct in a jagged grinding dance. The atmosphere was a swirling vortex of chemical reactions, a restless tapestry of vapour that refused to settle into equilibrium. This refusal to stay still is the defining characteristic of our world. While the Moon became a silent tomb and Mars a frozen desert, the Earth remained a frantic laboratory of energy. This was not due to some special providence, but because of a unique alignment of mass, distance, and composition. The machine had found a configuration that allowed for a continuous state of disequilibrium, a perpetual churning of matter that would eventually lead to the complexity of the cell. We must look upon that ancient, molten version of our home with a sense of distant horror. It was a world of boiling oceans and a sun that appeared faint and red through the haze of volcanic smog. There was no oxygen to breathe, no shield against the ultraviolet radiation that scorched the rocks. And yet, in the deep hydrothermal vents and the sun-drenched tidal pools, the toxic trail of the cosmos was being woven into something new. The molecules of the comet, the nitrogen and carbon and phosphorus, were being forced into ever-tightening spirals. The violence of the environment was the very engine of this transformation. Without the heat, without the impacts, and without the lethal chemistry of the primordial atmosphere, the transition from stone to spirit would never have occurred. We are the descendants of this cosmic violence. Every strand of our genetic code, every protein that facilitates a thought or a heartbeat, can trace its lineage back to the chaotic furnace of the Hadean epoch. We are the survivors of a billion-year-long catastrophe. The realization is a heavy one, for it strips away the illusion of our planet as a place designed for our comfort. The Earth did not care if life emerged. The machine merely continued to grind, and life was the friction produced by its gears. We are a fortunate accident of thermodynamics, a brief and glowing rearrangement of the same atoms that once drifted in the toxic wake of a prehistoric comet. As we contemplate this history, the scale paradox becomes overwhelming. We occupy a tiny sliver of time, a mere heartbeat in the vast epoch of the cosmos, yet we are the only part of the machine that has turned its gaze backward to witness the furnace from which it emerged. We look into the abyss and see the reflections of our own elemental ancestors. The nitrogen in our lungs, the iron in our blood, and the carbon that forms the basis of our very being were all once part of that chaotic cloud that refused to stay still. They were forged in the hearts of dying stars and delivered to a molten earth by the same ruthless mechanisms that now devour the comet. The silence of the early Earth was not the silence of peace, but the silence of a planet-wide explosion happening in slow motion. It was the sound of millions of tons of rock vaporizing upon impact, the roar of 1,000 volcanoes erupting in unison, and the hiss of steam as the first oceans attempted to form on a surface that was still too hot to hold them. This was the cradle of humanity, a place of fire and poison, a realm where survival seemed impossible. Yet, it is within this very crucible that the prebiotic paradox resides. The more hostile the environment, the more rapidly the chemistry was forced to adapt. The chaos was the catalyst. The instability was the invitation for complexity to take root. The Sentinel's journey toward the sun is a reminder that the universe does not preserve. It transforms. The ice of the comet is turned to gas, the gas is broken into atoms, and the atoms are scattered to become the seeds of new worlds or the fuel for new stars. Our world too will eventually be unravelled by the same solar fire that now consumes the visitor from the Oort cloud. The furnace will return, and the Earth will once again become a sphere of molten rock before it is finally swallowed by the expanding shadow of a dying sun. This is the inexorable cycle of the cosmos, a symphony of creation and destruction played out over eons that the human mind can barely conceive. We stand as the witnesses to this transition, the conscious remnants of a violent past. We look at the emerald glow of the comet and we do not see a stranger, we see a mirror. We see the same materials and the same physical laws that conspired to pull us out of the dark and into the light. The journey from the toxic trail of a frozen wanderer to the complexity of a human brain is a long one, but it is a single, continuous thread of cause and effect. There is no break in the chain, no moment where the laws of physics were suspended to allow for our arrival. We are the result of the machine's tireless work, the byproduct of a universe that is indifferent to our presence, but dictated by the very same mathematical necessity that governs the stars. The void remains, silent and eternal, watching as we attempt to make sense of our origins. We find ourselves trapped between the memory of the furnace and the certainty of the final freeze, a brief flicker of consciousness in a universe that is mostly shadow. But in that flicker, we find a magnificent defiance. We are the chaotic cloud that refused to stay still, the dust that learned to dream. We are the prebiotic paradox made manifest, a testament to the fact that even in the heart of a lethal abyss, the right arrangement of atoms can lead to a mind that wonders why it is there. The emerald light fades, the comet dissolves, and we are left alone in the dark, carrying the fire of the primordial furnace within us, forever driven forward by the inexorable logic of the cosmos toward an end we cannot forestall. The emerald spectre begins its slow retreat, withdrawing from the solar fire that nearly consumed its ancient soul. As the comet moves beyond the orbit of the inner planets, the fierce heat of the sun diminishes, and the violent outgassing that created its magnificent tail begins to subside. The vibrant shroud of gas and dust which glowed with such intensity against the blackness starts to thin and dissipate. The wanderer is returning to the abyss, leaving behind the remnants of its passage in the form of microscopic grains of ice and carbon, drifting like ghosts in the wake of a retreating army. Within a few short years, the comet will cross the threshold of the outer gas giants, and the silence of the void will once again claim it. It will spend the next several thousand years falling through the frozen dark, a lonely sentinel carrying the chemical signature of a world it will never truly know. As we watch this celestial visitor depart, we are forced to confront the staggering scale of the timeline upon which it operates. A single human life is a mere heartbeat in the context of the comet's orbit, and the entire history of our civilization is but a fleeting season in the life of the solar system. We have spent thousands of years looking up at the stars, attempting to find meaning in the patterns of light, yet we are only now beginning to understand the machinery that governs them. The cosmos does not operate on a human scale. It functions across eons, driven by an inexorable logic that cares nothing for the rise and fall of empires or the brief flowering of a biological species. The universe is a vast, indifferent ocean of energy and matter, and we are the tiny, fragile vessels attempting to navigate its depths. There is a profound melancholy in the realization that everything we have built, everything we love, and everything we are is temporary. The same sun that provided the energy for the prebiotic paradox to resolve into life will eventually become the agent of our destruction. In 5 billion years, the sun will exhaust its hydrogen fuel, and begin to swell into a red giant, its outer atmosphere expanding until it devours the inner planets. The Earth will be scorched, its oceans boiled away into the void, and the very rocks that form our mountains will melt into a sea of lava once more. The tapestry of life, woven over billions of years of evolution and struggle, will be unravelled in an instant of cosmic realignment. This is not a tragedy in the eyes of the universe. It is simply the next movement in a symphony that has been playing since the beginning of time. Yet, within this cold and mechanical reality, there exists a miracle that transcends the simple laws of physics. We are the rarity. In a universe that is mostly empty, silent, and dead, we represent the moment the machine woke up. We are the byproduct of carbon and water, of starlight and gravity, but we have become something more than the sum of our atoms. We are the witnesses. For billions of years the stars ignited and died in total solitude, their light falling upon barren rocks and frozen wastes where no eye was present to see them. The great catastrophes of the past, the collisions of galaxies and the collapse of nebulae, occurred in a vacuum of consciousness. But now, through us, the universe has developed the ability to see itself. We are the eyes of the cosmos, the sensory organs of a vast and ancient entity that is finally beginning to contemplate its own existence. Our role in this grand design is both humble and magnificent. We are the translators. The universe speaks in the language of mathematics, in the vibration of strings and the curvature of space, but it is a silent and violent story. It is a tale of entropy and decay, of heat death and the eternal dark. Our task is to take that silence and translate it into the language of wonder. When we look at the fading glow of a comet, we do not merely see a ball of dirty ice moving through a vacuum. We see a messenger from the primordial past. We see a link in the chain that connects the heart of a dying star to the synapses of a human brain. We find beauty in the chaos and purpose in the randomness. This is our defiance against the oblivion that awaits us. The existential pivot occurs when we realize that our insignificance is not a cause for despair, but a reason for a specific kind of melancholic optimism. Yes, we are small. Yes, we are temporary. But in the vast, yawning abyss of time, we were here. We existed. We felt the warmth of the sun and the sting of the wind. We asked why the stars shine and how the world began. Even if every trace of our existence is eventually erased by the expanding universe, the fact that we once lived and wondered can never be undone. The light we have seen and the thoughts we have had are now a permanent part of the history of the cosmos, a brief but brilliant flicker of awareness in an eternity of shadow. As the comet reaches the outer rim of the solar system and prepares to enter the long sleep of the Oort cloud, it leaves us behind on our fragile blue island. We are left to continue our work, to build our cities and dream our dreams while the cold machinery of the universe grinds on around us. We are the dreamers of the dust, the conscious remnants of a primordial furnace, forever striving to understand the mystery of our own arrival. The sentinel is gone, but the fire it ignited in our minds remains. We will continue to watch the dark, to listen for the echoes of the beginning, and to tell the story of the stars until the final light goes out. In the end, we are the only part of the universe that knows it is alive, and that is enough. Our role is to be the witness, to stand in the path of the inexorable and say that we saw it, we felt it, and for one glorious fleeting moment, we understood.